The following program is brought to you by Bruce Telecom.
Well, I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. Our first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility. You can do so now or if it arises on the agenda. None. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, so the next item is delegations. And this evening we have two delegations. The first is Tony Alberts. He's branch chair of the St. John's Ambulance, and he's here to present an award, and I'll let him make the announcement for the winner. So welcome, Tony. If you want to just come to the mic and push the button and...
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, honored guests. This evening, I have the privilege of presenting a silver level life-saving award. In February 2018, and then again in June of 2018, Constable Laurel Hopkins provided life-saving first aid to individuals in distress. Without the first aid knowledge and actions taken by Constable Hopkins, these individuals would have not survived. On behalf of St. John Ambulance, the Priory of Canada, I am pleased to recognize Constable Laurel Hopkins for the Silver Level Life-Saving Award. Constable. Out front? Sure. What's that? Easiest way there, Dave.
Well, once again, congratulations, Laurel. The next item on the agenda is delegations, and this evening we have the second one is Kevin Larson. He's here as a Saugeen Shores resident about the Blue Water School Board student accommodation. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Your Worship. I never get tired of saying that. That's a great greeting there. And I say once again, as I have done so in the past, thank you all for the work you do for our community. Much appreciated. I'm here tonight regarding a recent announcement by the school board to move grades 7 and 8 students into the high school. I have an idea for you on this, but first some history. Before 1998, and that's 20 years ago, school boards would work with municipal politicians, set local education property tax rates, and then municipalities would collect the taxes on the board's behalf. After 1998, the Ministry of Education began using a provincially controlled funding model to determine each board's overall allocation. Again, before 1998, municipal politicians like you had influence on local priority setting and spending. After 1998, you lost that influence and connection. This means the most closely connected politicians are municipal politicians. You have lost this important role and connection. This loss has been recognized by the Rural Ontario Municipal Association in its document called The Rural and Northern Lens. And I quote, "Relationships between school boards and municipal governments, as well as with local citizens, need to be strengthened." I repeat, from Roma, relationships between school boards and municipal governments, as well as with local citizens, need to be strengthened. Now to our current enrollment challenge. Great growth, but where are we going to place our students? The board has taken the position that the decision in this matter is theirs. Because this is a relocation of less than 50% of the students, no accommodation review is required. No consultation is required. This flies in the face of a very famous axiom on consultation. Nothing about us without us. I repeat, nothing about us without us. Without consultation, you get distrust. People lose confidence in the decision makers, and support for change evaporates even if it's the right change. But this gives you an opportunity. You have a chance to reach out to your citizens. You have a chance to lead a consultation effort to seek out well-vetted and lasting solutions. You have a chance to influence this and future accommodation decisions. About 15 years ago, I participated in my first accommodation review as a parent in Kincardine. We reached out to parents. We did the consultation. We surveyed parents. The result was a consensus decision. We sent that to the school board. Then, Director of Education David Armstrong referred to our process as the model of excellence for all. No ARC ever since has been that successful. Saugeen Shores residents want what you want, what's best for this community. We can do that now. You can do this now. I'm asking you to take the lead. You are the politicians most closely connected to our community. There are 9 of you elected to represent Saugeen Shores. Compare this to the fact that we have only 1 trustee on the school board, and we share that person with Aaron Eldersley. This gives you the leadership position. So what I'm proposing is this, that you strike up a committee to perform a community-wide consultation on student accommodation for Saugeen Shores. Simple. From memory, the Kincardine ARC work that we did only took a few months. You have the time now, but you will lose its timeliness if you don't act soon. The committee I'm proposing would be empowered to create its own terms of reference, establish membership, establish its processes, identify voting rights, meeting norms, etc. Empower that committee. In my delegation document that is part of the agenda tonight, I have suggested some membership ideas. I will leave that with you. I have other ideas in my document, such as inviting the Ministry of Education representative from Barrie to explain any of the relevant ministry rules, processes, and expectations. Again, I will leave that with you. This idea also is a low-cost idea for the town, perhaps only needing a budget to pay for photocopying. This idea also does not involve any huge commitment by or burden on town staff. What the council does is charge this committee to come back to council with community ideas for accommodating student growth, and then proudly share this with the school board. We are the partners. I'm quite confident that an incredible group of volunteers would be willing to help make this happen. Many are sitting behind me right here, right now. An important note for you in determining membership of the committee, I'd like to stress, Ontario Regulation 612 on school councils and parent involvement committees grants each school council the right to consult with parents. And I quote from section 23, "As school councils shall consult with parents of pupils enrolled in the school about matters under consideration by the council. It is vitally important that each school council be represented in any community-wide consultation. They have the authority to consult with parents." I open my remarks on the history, a history of the change that distanced local education decision-making from you, the locally elected municipal politicians. You know the community best. You all know that having great schools and programs are intimately linked to the continued success of this community. You have a chance here to help your community through this important time. I understand the next step would require a notice of motion by a member of council at the next meeting. I would encourage that step and the support of council. Thank you, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions for Mr. Larson? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming in, Kevin, and raising this. Oh, you're all right there. I just wanted to make the comment. I think it's clear that schools are critically important and to the community, and having enough school space is a critical part of allowing the community to continue to grow. Something that we are justifiably focused on here, and I have had the opportunity in the last number of weeks to speak to Dave Mason, our local trustee, Ron Motts, the chairman of the board, as well as the Minister of Education on this issue. And I would just say that I think the best thing we can do at this point is, as the new board comes into office, which is going to happen here in the next number of weeks, to engage with them as we have engaged in the last while. This actually, the town has had a pretty good back and forth with the board in the last number of months, well back, giving them statistical information in terms of what population is going to look like going forward. So we have a pretty good back and forth relationship with the board, and I think working with them to help make the point, and I think it's something that a lot of members of the board understand, that we need that additional space in this community. We need to start planning for it right away, because it's a long process to get new school space in a community. It takes a long time. So we need to keep driving that point home. We need more school space. We need to start planning to construct it soon, and hopefully we can continue to have a dialogue with the board to get that done. But I would certainly appreciate your comments. And I think the point I wanted to make was that it's something that we are thinking about and have been working on for quite a while with the board, and want to keep working on, because it's so critical, such a critical component to what we're doing everywhere else in enabling the community to grow. So we appreciate what you've said. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Desmaillet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Kevin, for your very well prepared statements. And just for my own clarification, and we all know that this has been an issue that's been in media, social media, and other things about the grade 7 and 8s moving over to SDSS. From your perspective, is this a misguided avenue that's being taken?
I have been on record as saying I really don't have an opinion strongly in favor or against the current move. I could very easily picture a committee working on this come forward with that as a recommendation to possibly support the board's decision. But imagine the thrust of that, or the support in that decision, if a community-wide consultation reaches the same decision, or same recommendation, or other options could come to the fore that none of us has even considered. That's one of the benefits of a broad-based consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Kevin, I like exactly what you just said. And for me, it's about certainly about consultation, but it's about community confidence. And And we have a board who have been doing their thing and budget driven, and I understand why they do their thing. Money does mean a lot to them. They have a lot of pressure with money, but I feel like, and I throw this back to the deputy mayor, soon to be mayor, and I ask the question: what reports, what studying are they doing? What are they basing their decisions on? Because it seems to me like we were pre-warned about these kinds of events taking place 4 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, and still it seems to like it was a sudden knee-jerk reaction to a pending problem. It's like they just don't understand how many people are going to register for kindergarten every June, July, whenever they register. They're, oh my goodness, we've had way more than we know what to do with, and I can't believe that. I just can't believe that. So I went to one of their meetings, as you know, represented us, the joint board meeting, and yet it was still being talked about options, about Paisley School, and about changing geographical boundaries and changing bus routes. I know where my grandkids go to school, they double back the same buses. Their busing costs are huge in the city of Waterloo, so they double them back, and they send the little kids early, and then they send the older kids later, and all those things start to affect how you unravel this. So I'd like to put it back in the box, even though I'm guilty of being outside of the box often. But I think here we have a chance, and I would like to see some of what Kevin is indicating as options, and what you're saying, Luke, as options. We get that community confidence back, saying what we're doing is a good path for now. It's got best practices involved. And certainly we can do better, and we can end up with a made in Saugeen Shores solution if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks a lot.
The next item on the agenda is the general government staff report. It has to do with council remuneration, and we have Jocelyn Meekins. Welcome, Jocelyn, from Ward Up to Grove.
Am I on? All right. Good evening. I am Jocelyn Meekins from Borden Up to Grove. Thank you for having me. I am here to report on council remuneration and taking a look at what's happening external in the market. As I go through the report, so my understanding is all of council does have a copy. As I go through, if you have questions, certainly ask it as we go. And hopefully I will be able to answer those questions. Are there any before I actually start? All right. Pardon me? All right. We did conduct a review for council compensation. Our recommendations are in line with what has happened in the past for staff here at Saugeen Shores. Everything that's provided in the report, it's important to mention, is in 2018 dollars. So any standard cost of living adjustments need to be in addition to the rates and figures that are provided in the report. So I do have two sections of recommendations. The first being immediate, that's to increase council for the mayor, maintaining no increases or decreases. For the deputy mayor, increasing by $739. Vice deputy mayor increased by $2,448. That's based on maintaining a gap between the vice deputy mayor and the councillors, and the councillors increased by $2,520. Salary rates, so no increase based on the 1/3 reduction related to the tax exemption that is being eliminated. And also to increase benefits and reimbursements. So implementing an IT reimbursement of up to $1,200 per counselor per term. Cost of $10,800 per term. Provide life insurance benefits, and that's a cost to be determined, with no other benefits or reimbursement changes. So those are our immediate recommendations regarding the compensation review. We've also included some future recommendations. So going through this process, learned a number of different things about the market, but also internal practices. So the 1/3 exemption rule, when we did reach out to the comparator group, we had quite a few that responded that they weren't sure what they were doing yet. So we are recommending to reach back out to them at this point of the year to see if we can get any better information for you in regards to any maybe changes to the market. So if the majority of the comparators are increasing, that may change what you want to do in terms of increasing that compensation. You may fall behind if that shift does actually materialize. Annually, so we want to make sure that council is being compensated for the cost of participating and being in council. So making sure that the actual costs associated related to IT and various other things are actually being captured appropriately based on the reimbursement and expenses within your existing policies and based on our increased recommendations for IT. Last but not least, so the comparator group. So we are aware of how the comparator group was developed in the past, and best practice, take a look at your comparator group. Make sure it still makes sense for future compensation reviews to make sure that you are capturing your reality and keeping in consideration your future as well. So just taking a look at that if you're going to do future compensation reviews. So external pay equity. Described as paying competitively compared to groups of similar organizations. So from the Saugeen Shores website, it is the role of council to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, to develop and evaluate policies and programs to determine which services the municipality provides, to ensure that administrative practices and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council and to maintain the financial integrity of the municipality. So, like the delegation just recently spoken about, Saugeen Shores is a growing community. So making sure that council is being paid fairly is really important. Making sure that you have people who are strategically making good decisions for your community and reflecting the wishes of your community are really important. So it's all entrenched in what you say on your website, but also mirrored in these recommendations. So project steps. I'm on page 3 if anybody's following. Collect the information. So actually from your municipality, contact the existing 19 comparators that were in that comparator group, do a salary comparison, include market analysis and total compensation, to taking a look at benefits as well as reimbursements, and then of course reporting back to council with our recommendations and the costs associated. Page 4 mainly just talks about the comparator group. So it actually talks about the criteria that were used in the past in developing that list. Inclusion in previous market check and organizational review. At that point, it was the 2011 census information. So part of our recommendations do relate to that, taking a look at the most up-to-date information, FIR data as well. So we did contact all 19, 14 participated. Just to note, 8 of the 14 were actually smaller populations than Saugeen Shores. So again, looking at 2011 and 2016 census information, you're growing fairly rapidly, so something to keep in mind and keep in the back of your mind when you're making some decisions. Median population for the group, 12,869. I have provided the full list there with your population as well. Any questions so far? Yes.
I wonder if you could just explain for the public, those watching at home, what the 1/3 tax exemption is that you're referring to.
Yes, okay. So, best way to describe this. One-third tax exemption applies to 1/3 of the compensation provided to council, and it is tax exempt. So that means that there is no tax applied to that compensation. So with the change, it means that all of it, 3/3, is now going to be taxed. So the impact to council is that the take-home effect is less because you will be taxed on that 1/3 income that hasn't been taxed in the past. So there's a number of different things that are out there that talk about why this has happened, and the impact, and it was it was based on this concept of reimbursement and expenses. So the intention in the past when it was set up, to my understanding, is related to the cost of doing business of being a council member, and seeing that reimbursements and expenses have continued to be better captured, so that 1/3 tax exemption wasn't necessarily applicable in the same way. So they're removing it from the government availability of the tax exemption.
I also read that one of the ideas of removing it as an exemption is the idea that many other people in other walks of life have expenses to do with their doing business that they don't get compensated for, and that they were trying to make it fair. I think that was what I read as being the justification for taking that starting January of next year.
Yep, starting January 1st of 2019, certainly one of them.
It was always an option of council to forgive that also, or to not accept that and use a different form. So some councils have given it up, some haven't. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you also. Could you just clarify which level of government is the one that is it the CRA or is it the municipal Ministry of Municipal Affairs that are making this change?
CRA.
CRA, so it's the federal government that's...
Tax law.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Other questions? We do have another whole section talking about the 1/3, so I may repeat some of the information, maybe better worded, as it's prepared statements in the report. Talking about an analysis, if there's no other questions before I go forward. Okay. Targeted content of the review, so market rates, type of compensation, and the reimbursements that are provided. The AMTCO actually put out a report March of 2018 as well. So I do actually speak about this because what happened in this compensation review is also mirrored in the AMTCO report quite closely. So I do feel personally quite good about the recommendations and what came out of your comparator group, because it is actually seen in the AMTCO content as well. So council size and structure, from your website again, composed of a mayor, deputy mayor, vice deputy mayor who are elected at large, and 6 ward councillors who serve for a term of 4 years. So it is important to highlight, as I'm sure you all know, your structure is different than other municipalities and townships as well. So of the 14 comparators surveyed, no councils with a vice deputy mayor, and there were actually 2 comparators that had only a mayor and councillors. Overall, this means that you have a percentage-wise less councillors than anybody in your comparator group, and I would suggest that that probably is not news to you. Any questions about composition? Okay. So manner of compensation, Saugeen Shores council members are paid via salary, along with 13 of the 14 comparator municipalities. This is similar to the findings in the AMTCO report as well. So it noted that regional location and population influence how council is paid. So some information out of the AMTCO report. Municipalities in central and southwestern Ontario are more likely to offer a salary, which you see here. 71% of municipalities in southwestern Ontario, with a population of 10,000 to 24,999, pay the head of council and members of council a salary. 64% of municipalities with a population over 10,000 pay their head of council a salary, and the majority of municipalities with a population over 10,000 pay their councillors a salary. So you see that this is the same as what we found in our comparator group. So salary findings, The mayor looks to be above market, deputy mayor below the market, 739, vice deputy mayor, no comparator results, and councillors below market by 2,520, which is what you see in our recommendations for adjusting the compensation. Similar to the AMTCO report, so actually the rates were very, very close, which shows that your comparator group is capturing the municipalities quite similarly. Our recommendation for the mayor, no increases or pay cuts, and the rest of the increases to reflect that market rate. Total estimated annual cost, $18,307. Any questions?
Mayor, so Jocelyn, the comparator group and the 55th percentile, doesn't that speak to there's somebody at 100? Like when we talk about 55th percentile, can you boil that down into a different language that says what that means? Like when you do the comparator group, we're 5% above average?
So that is the target compared to the comparator group. So median is what most people, average is what most people think of, which includes all the highs and lows. And what we would use statistically is median or percentile rate. So the median would discount top and bottom, working into the middle to find that middle rate. The 55th, so the median is 50th. The 55th is saying that you target to pay 5% better than what the median rate is. So it's not really about 100% and percentile as much as it is working towards the middle to make sure that you're on target with median or another compensation practice related to that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Per diem rates, so 13 comparators paying via salary, so taking that one comparator that is not out of this discussion because it does drastically change. That means that they pay them a rate and then they use per diems per council meeting to make up the rest of the compensation. So it's important to note that that was not part of this per diem analysis. 5 are also paying per diem rates. They're used in different councils differently. So in general, could be attending conferences, professional development training, special additional meetings, committee of the whole. So they are used in different ways at different municipalities, which makes it very difficult to kind of compare apples to apples. How you pay and when you use them varies significantly. So workload was not part of the compensation and remuneration review. So that's why we don't have recommendations to adjust or address the per diem rates, because that would get into a conversation about workload. The question of fair compensation, it will continue to change as your community changes. So in terms of growth, there may be times where council is spending significantly more effort and time associated with the support of the community than maybe in other times. If you feel like you are reaching a tipping point related to how compensation is being provided, increased commitments and expectations can be looked at, but again, it wasn't part of this analysis. Any questions about per diem rates?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thank you, Jocelyn, for your presentation. You mentioned that the base compensation rate was the per diem rate was not part of the study. In other words, there are municipalities that have a base rate and then there's a compensation rate for each meeting that you attend. You said that was not part of the review, and I guess my question either to you or to our CAO was that done purposely? Why did we not consider a base rate and then be compensated for each meeting attended? I know we had this discussion quite a ways back, but was that done by design for a reason?
Sorry, okay. I should clarify. So there was one comparator that does pay that way. So when you look at what their rates are for per diem rates, it's very hard because they're not using them in the same way. So when we did look at the 13 comparators that are paying with salary, the same as what you are, the same as what Southwestern Ontario is doing and the size of municipalities across the province are doing, when we look at that, we see rates that are very different from what you're doing compared to those 5 that are using them. But why it's different relates to how you use them. So asking those in-depth questions, when are you using them, when are you not, all of that related to workload was not part of the target of this. So we did take a look, and I do have information on it, but I don't feel like it's concrete enough for me to say you're paying too much or you're not paying enough, because I think that it would really come down to how are you using them. Because we do so much work with municipalities, I know that how you're using them is different than some of the other comparators and some of the other municipalities in Southwestern Ontario, which may relate to why the rates are different. So that's just from our experience, but it wasn't part of the content of what we requested from your comparator
Okay,
group.
that's fine. I just was wondering if it was part of the, the terms of reference for the study where we purposely left that out or not, but you've answered my question. Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
I feel like I need to say this because I'm on the way out. But so thank you, Mr. Mayor. But 2 statutory committees I served on in the last 4 years. The Emergency Management Committee met about 3 times a year, and I did more work on that committee than I did on the Heritage Committee that I served for 2 years that met almost every month. But when I was on the Waterfront Committee, because I had some sort of passion for that, I guess, I ended up feeling like I was personally doing more work. What is work? Define work for a councillor, and then just attending meetings to me, and you know that. I know that Mike knows that. I know that you know that, Mike, is that I believe that not using the meeting method is to be paid by meeting attendance, I think is the wrong way to go. I think that we're elected because people believe in us, and then we do the work that's required. And if we're not doing the work that's required, then we'll pay the piper every 4 years. So I don't think that we need to go to the meeting style, and I wouldn't support that. Thank you.
Okay. Benefits and reimbursement. So in addition to wages, benefits and reimbursement are part of the cost of doing business. So Saugeen Shores provides conferences and professional development, mileage, IT hardware, health and dental benefits. So in the report there, you can see all of the various different types there and how many of the comparators are actually providing it. So related to our recommendations, we are recommending an IT reimbursement. So this is related to making sure we're capturing the cost of doing business. IT relates to communication, and each of you will communicate with your community in a different way. So allowing for that flexibility, I think, is important. Recognizing rural communities are somewhat different. There could be somebody who lives out somewhere where they can't get cable internet and they have to get satellite, and the cost is different, right? So I think that introducing a reimbursement that is related to the term of council and related to the cost of doing business and how each of you communicate and connect, I think is an appropriate way to capture that expense. Comparator group, 3 of the 5 with IT compensation indicated a value of $1,200 either per term or yearly, with an additional 2 of 5 providing iPads or tablets, so similar to what you're providing here as well. Any questions on the IT recommendation?
Councillor Madison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just through you, so that's $1,200 per term for us or per year?
Per term.
Per term?
Yep. And that relates to the future recommendations as well. So making sure that there is some sort of tracking and consideration in the future if IT reimbursement at $1,200 per term is not capturing the cost of doing business related to IT.
So is that something that somebody could one time, if they needed a home, something that was up to the $1,200 one time cost, and then that's covered over the 4 years? Could that be, was that something that would be allowed, or is it still breaks down to $300 per year for the 4-year term?
Yep, so our recommendation is to develop a policy that encapsulates what you want to do. So do you want to have people be able to submit on a monthly basis, semi-annually, annually basis, and what exactly you're allowing for? So I'm suggesting, cell phones is part of that, hardware is part of that, internet is part of that, data plans is part of that. It's all part of how you communicate. So I think that there needs to be some parameters put on that, and that's up to council and Saugeen Shores to decide.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Any other questions on IT? Okay, so benefits, half the comparator group is providing some sort of benefits. 3 of those are providing only life insurance. So we're recommending implementing life insurance benefits in line with the 7 comparators. There's more information on why we recommend that, but basically life insurance protects you as council members from bearing any burden on your family if there's unfortunately a loss on council. So making sure that that community aspect is kind of covering that. We don't think that there's any other recommendations related to benefits and reimbursements, so no other changes are recommended. Yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to benefits, there are certain members of council take advantage of the benefit package that is available to us as councillors, and others decline that. Did you ever consider a compensation scheme where you could use the cost of those benefits towards another expense?
No, I hadn't. But I do think it's a great point. So in the case that there are people choosing to decline for various reasons, I would say that the same, certainly I would expect to be applied to the life insurance benefits. And I think it would be a cost analysis on how much is being captured by people declining and what the best use is. Yep. Other questions? Okay. Cost of living. So cost of living is provided and it does match the percentage provided to municipal staff, and we are recommending that you maintain that practice. The median cost of living provided, just as note, was 1.5 for the comparator group, but whether or not that captures what's happening here, I think cost of living is something that you're quite familiar with and have a standard practice. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be a true statement to say that a lot of the comparator group councils around southwestern Ontario are probably sometime around this week or next week having the same discussion that we're having about COLA, and the 1.5 is actually what applied to the 2017-2018 compensation?
Yeah, so this is the 2018 information, and we have seen a shift where there is a standard practice of how cost of living is actually determined and relating it to the CPI in a related month. So that is something that we've seen in terms of municipalities adopting part of their pay administration. So paying in line with what you're doing for municipal staff is appropriate here.
Because CPI, as we know, for the latter part of 2018 is a little higher than it was 12 months ago.
Yeah, September's rate was 2.2. So, any other questions on that? Nope. 1/3 rule. So I have spoken a little bit about this. Of the comparator group, 9 were to be determined. So that's significant in terms of the 14 that were actually asked to provide information. So the actual information, I'll read it off in case I was not entirely clear with my explanation previously. So tax exemption rules applicable to municipal officer wages and allowances have changed effective January 1st, 2019. So that reference is actually provided through the Canada Revenue Agency. Municipal elected officials across the country have been able to decide to use a 1/3 tax exemption in lieu of claiming expenses related to duties. The reason for the change, many Canadians receive benefits such as daily food allowance or transit fare, which are counted as taxable income, and other Canadians do not enjoy the tax exemption for non-accountable expense allowances, which is what Ms. Grace was saying earlier. So it's very difficult for us to provide a recommendation to change this, being that the comparator group has not seen a shift, although we did have 3 of your comparator group identifying that they are actually increasing compensation to make that adjustment. So our recommendation, maintain the current rates at this time and reach back out to your comparator group to determine if the market has seen a marketable shift.
I just wondered, so for those 3 that have made an increase, how are they calculating what that increase should be? Because that tax hit will be different for everybody, particularly in a circumstance where, like, if you're a full-time council, then it would be very similar because everybody's making about the same amount of money. But if you're a part-time councillor like us, I suspect we all have different levels of income, meaning the tax hit will be different. So how are they figuring out what the increase should be?
Yes, so we didn't ask the comparator group for that information, but again, working with other municipalities, some of my understanding from some that we have supported in the past through this question is exactly that. It's very complicated, and for every single person on council, it does differ, because if it's your only income or close to your only income, that tax rate that you're in is going to differ from somebody who's holding a full-time position. So it is very complicated, and the comparator group, I didn't ask for specifics. Any questions further on the tax exemption? Okay. So, conclusion, you are a growing community. Strategically, Saugeen Shores recognizes the need for competent and forward-thinking members on council to set the direction of the municipality, aligning staff efforts to the goals of the community represented through council. Allows the municipality to accomplish purposeful, manageable, and strategic direction towards their goals. Fair compensation for council member efforts representing their community will continue to attract strategic and forward-thinking members who see value in representing their community. So we have provided next steps, so to accept and implement the immediate recommendations effective for next term of council, January 1st, 2019, and to review future recommendations for further council direction, updates to bylaws, procedures as appropriate.
Thank you. Any further questions for you? If not, then thank you. The recommendation is that council accept the immediate recommendations provided in the Ward Upper Grove Council Remuneration Report, and that staff be directed to include the recommendations in the 2019 draft budget, and further that staff be delegated the task to monitor the future recommendations provided by Ward Upper Grove and recommend implementation as required. Any questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I just made the comment, it's important to be clear that this is not approval of this funding increase. By my calculation, we're talking about about $30,000 to $35,000 increased cost contained in this report. And what we're doing at this moment, if I'm not mistaken, is referring it to the budget, the 2019 budget, for consideration by council at that time. So this is not approval of these increases, only referral to the 2019 budget, which I would say is appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yep. You're correct. Any further questions or comments, Deputy? Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. What bothers me about putting it through the budget is we're putting this onus on a new council to have to adopt this. This question was raised over 18 months ago. It should have been brought forward in that time and taken care of in that time. So if need be, I'll be asking that we take care of it, ask for pre-budget approval, so it's not put in the hands and the problems that will be accompanying with the new council. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Minaj.
I would just support that last comment, Mr. Mayor, as I think that it's our business to conclude, and I don't believe it's necessary to pass it on. I think that it should be something we can decide now. Thank you.
Further questions? No changes to the recommendation. All in favor of the recommendation? That is it. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is, let me see. Thank you. Communications, petitions for the committee of the whole information. There's 5 items under that. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to speak for a second to the Conservation Authority's 2019 draft budget, which is there for your review. I just make a couple of comments about it. One, it's a pretty well a hold-the-line budget. It's a 0% increase. There's a number of increase. It's not as though we've frozen wages or anything. There's a bit of an increase in cost, but that's being taken care of out of a 2018 surplus. Looks like the authority will generate close to a $250,000 surplus in 2018, continuing its excellent trend of good financial outcomes. But I did want to make the comment because it's important for everybody to know that but now that we have brought, over the course of the last decade, the authority into what I would say is excellent financial shape, it enables the authority to begin to do stewardship in a way that I think is really important and something that the authorities often wanted to do for many years and has been unable to because it just hasn't had the money. And so the authority decided as part of these budget discussions to do a couple of things. One is to extend and continue the agricultural outreach program to the tune of $64,000. That has been an excellent and successful program for the authority, encouraging cover cropping across the watershed. And it has added an additional $40,000, which it will make available contingent on staff and the authority obtaining external funding to the satisfaction of the authority. And what you can anticipate, I think, in 2019 is for the authority to go out to municipalities, like the upper tiers and possibly lower tiers, with that $40,000 and seek a partnership or partnerships to do things very similar to, there's a program in Huron County where a number of stewardship initiatives there's partnership funding provided by the county and the Conservation Authority to do things like wellhead decommissioning, to do river crossings for cattle, these kinds of things, and really important stewardship projects. And I think it's done in partnership between the Conservation Authority there and the County of Huron. And I think that I think this is a really important thing, and I think it'll be, I'm very hopeful the municipalities will pick it up. It's important to remember, in Saugeen Shores, we often see in the spring, and particularly in spring, with the spring runoff on our beaches. I mean, our Department of Community Services will know in Southampton, we see an awful lot of debris come out the mouth of that river, and it gets spewed out onto our beaches, which is a huge cost to us to clean up. It's a huge ecological concern, I know, to a lot of residents. And part of the issue there is, it's not the whole issue, but part of the issue is runoff occurring because we've lost some tree canopy, lost some cover cropping, these kinds of things. And so if we can do more upriver to plant trees and secure those riverbanks, I believe that we'll have less things arriving down here on our end of the watershed and leaving debris on our beaches and causing issues for us. So I think it's a really beneficial potential project, that partnership for us to be involved in. I certainly hope the next council will consider it, and I certainly hope the Conservation Authority will come here and offer it up to us. So, but it's an exciting. So I think for that reason, it's a budget. I'm very excited. This is going to be my last budget on the Conservation Authority, and I'm very excited that that we are doing these things at this time, because I think hopefully it opens the door to more action like this in the future, more stewardship from the authority, because I think that'd be really positive for the watershed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak to the election petition that was submitted by Mr. Harry Shildroth. I spoke to Mr. Shildroth about this in person, and he just talked about some of the frustrations that he and a fair number of other people were experienced through the election process. And I just had a couple of comments. First, I want to thank the clerk's department and staff for the wonderful job they did getting over the Monday night issue with the voting difficulties we had and getting through to Tuesday. So thank you, Lyndon staff, for your great efforts. It was well done. It's interesting to note that the city of Guelph has turned their back on electronic voting, went back to paper voting this year. Long discussion they had around the council table, but they did go back to paper. And my question is this: our vote, I believe, was around 49–50%. Last 4 years ago was 58%. There was no mayor's race this year. Numbers tend to drop a little bit without a mayor's race. We were one of the higher percentages in the province of Ontario. Many were in the 35 to 45% range. My question is this, Mr. Mayor, will there be a post-election report come to this council where we will have the opportunity, when it's still fresh in our minds, to the next council, to be 3 new around the table, but will we have the opportunity to speak to a post-election report where we can talk about the telephone, the internet? Is there, should there be a combination of electronic and a couple of days of paper on the Sunday, Monday, for example, which some people spoke to me about? So will we have the opportunity to speak to the election with the new council in December, perhaps, or January?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The answer to your question is yes. There will be an election report coming forward to the new council. either probably early January. And another opportunity is when the council decides. So it's a council decision on what format that you want to hold your election in, right? So the new council will also have that opportunity, 2019, 2020, that type of thing, and you'll have that real decision. That final decision making will be with the next term of council.
Councillor Grace.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if I could just add as well that as part of our report, I'd like to give the public the opportunity to formally express their helpful comments and suggestions based on their experience as voters by providing the opportunity to complete some kind of survey online or otherwise, makes maybe paper surveys available. I've spoken to a couple of people who've just, you know, described really technical issues like not being able to understand certain things on the phone or not understanding certain instructions in the paper, instructions for the online voting that I think would be helpful for us when we're doing our assessment. And as Councillor Myatt has said, doing it while it's fresh in our minds and fresh in the public's minds. So I would like to suggest that we do that and add that to our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, and we'll move on. There's no reports of municipal councillors. The next item is report of department heads. We have 5. Councillor Grace.
Question on the public information number 4, communication on the proposed telecommunications structure at North Rankin. I wanted to know if staff knows if this is going to appear on this month's planning agenda.
For what purpose? Is there an application? There's no application. We have no authority over it. So what would be the purpose of putting it on the agenda?
Well, it's been, there have been, people have been allowed to, the public has been allowed to. That's
a process that's covered. Yeah, that's a process that's covered by the applicant and the federal government. So I would suspect, to me, I think when you try to duplicate that, you get away from it. I would suspect that anybody that has any concerns is to participate in the process as it's set up through the federal government.
Okay, so then is that something that I can get clarification from in terms of that we have no authority to decide whether a telecommunications tower goes?
I can assure you we have no authority.
Thank you.
And I think if you're interested, I mean, there is opportunity to comment to it. And on the notice here, it will tell you how to do that. Or it will tell you who to contact, I believe. I could be wrong there, but there's... pardon me? I believe, let me see if I can find it here. Yep. Get away ahead. Yeah, the notice in the package. So if you wish to comment, I would suspect that's your best bet to contact those people.
Clarification question: does the municipality have the right to discuss this in a council meeting and to make a comment as a municipality?
Well, I guess we could collectively or individually. If you individually wish to, by all means, I would suggest you do that by yourself. Or if this council wants to take a position on it and say one thing or other, that's up to this council.
So
or any
may
council.
I ask for guidance on how we would go about doing that?
Well, I guess a notice of motion.
And that would be submitted for discussion at the planning committee or at a later date?
Well, I would suspect you would want to do it at the committee of the whole or council here, because the planning, like I say, the planning committee has no authority over federal telecommunications infrastructure. Now, the next item is reported department heads. We have 5 items there, and the first one is inclement weather procedures. Any questions on it? Just for information, the waterfront master plan, I think, do you want to speak to it, David? The next item?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So this report is an information report. It outlines our plan forward to advance the waterfront master plan and make full use of the property that the current opportunity presents. Staff plan on issuing an RFP is described in the report, and following submission we'll be reporting back to council on the next steps. Depending on the submissions and the things that we get in, additional public consultation could occur. And I'm happy to answer any questions members of council may have.
Questions? Councillor Mike.
Mine was just strictly timing to the CEO, David. I think this is tremendous, with the work you've done on it, and the RFPs look like we're wanting to move forward. I certainly support it and see what the future could hold for development at our waterfront, a very important resource we have down there. And I just wonder about the timing. What do you see in terms of rolling it out?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, our intent is to issue the RFP in the next couple of weeks. We'll give plenty of time for groups to respond to it, and we'll be reporting back to council in the new year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to David then would be, this indicates to me that we have moved forward. We have closed the business loop with the current user of the property, and we're moving forward, or there is still business to conclude. Where are we with? 2 years ago we were in lease negotiations. Last year we were in lease negotiations, and now we're moving forward. We're either not in lease negotiations and the lease is clearly over, and now this is something new and opportunistic, or there's still something left behind. Can you explain that or enlighten me? Thank you. The lease is clearly over. There's no discussions with the building owner, and there haven't been for some time, so we're moving forward.
No further questions. The next item then is recreational cannabis legalization, and there's a report there. I don't know if you want to speak to it, David, or entertain any questions. Sure, go ahead.
This is just a report to paint the picture a little bit for members of council and the public. The key decision point, quite frankly, is whether the municipality opts out of retail cannabis. We're not asking for direction tonight. We just, again, wanted to provide you information on that. The municipality has the choice of either formally opting out, and if they do that, if we opt out, this is again for a brick and mortar retail spots, you can opt back in at any point. If you opt in, or if you don't opt out, you cannot change your decision going forward. So some municipalities are taking the stance of opting out and seeing how things happen, and knowing that they can always opt in at future. So we'll require direction from council before, I think the date is January 22nd on that, and then we'll also be asking you for formal direction in terms of the use of cannabis on public property. We'll be looking for some direction on that, and there's some commentary in the report that you can read, and happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 2 questions. The first one is there was a reference to a 14-day window that communities had the opportunity to provide a comment on specific applications. I wasn't sure from the report, is that window after January 22nd? Or Is it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. If we don't opt out, then the province will be licensing businesses in town, brick and mortar businesses in town, and their decisions trump all of our current zoning bylaws, and nothing that we can do restricts where those buildings go. We will be able to comment with a 14-day window period of our position on those applications. What our plan is, because the 14 days is such a narrow window, our plan is if we don't opt out, staff will develop generic restrictions like other communities have for other types of businesses that staff will be delegated the authority to respond to when those applications come in. So we could have standardized restrictions if we don't opt out to say we don't want these retail stores within 200 meters of a school, or we don't want 3 in a block. Whatever those things are, council would approve that and delegate the authority to staff to submit those comments for each application we get.
One more question, and that's on the additional funding to municipalities who do not opt out. Several months ago at the AMO conference, I heard that that would only happen if the province makes a profit in excess of $100 million. And then municipalities will receive 50% of the surplus over the $100 million. Has that changed? Is that just...
I'm not sure, quite frankly. There has been some changes. All I can tell you is what we've heard most recently from AMO is that all municipalities will be getting $5,000 in 2019 and $5,000 in 2020. If you don't opt out, so if you're in, additional funding will flow. We don't know how much or what the formula will be.
Thank you.
Start here. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, no.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to loop back to the comment about the zoning bylaw and the ability to the province to put a retail outlet in any zone. I take that to mean that so even zones that exist today where retail is not permitted, the province could license is saying that they would or may license a cannabis retail shop.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's my understanding that the province has said we will put them where we want them to be. The community will have 14 days to comment. I'm not suggesting they will. Yeah. You would think that if they're creating a retail operation, they would put it in areas suitable of that. But that's our understanding today.
Just make if I could, Mr. Mayor, just make the comment that that's concerning, and that that goes down a road similar to courses taken by previous governments to permit things in contravention or against municipal zoning. And I think I think that I think it's important to put on record that at least it's certainly my view that that's not the right way to approach this. Certainly hope the province would respect municipal zoning with regard to existing zoning, but not punitive zoning against cannabis, but just existing retail zoning, and would hope they would not override that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the opt out. You take that power away when you opt out. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again through you to our CAO. It's interesting to note that the town of Markham and town of Orangeville and the town of Shelburne, we just spoke with this week about the new bylaw that's just about to be approved, already approved by Markham. Takes a little different direction than bricks and mortar. I'd like to speak a little bit to the use of cannabis in public places. I'm speaking about main streets and parks and waterfront, and spoke to a fair number of people in the last couple of months. Cannabis question came up, and there's some concern with new legislation, particularly young parents who are saying, I really prefer that my son or daughter not be exposed to a person smoking cannabis on Main Street or at a ball diamond soccer field and at the waterfront. So these three communities have played the lead role here, I believe, in passed bylaws to eliminate the use of cannabis in public spaces. I know, and I realize it's a bylaw enforcement officer issue, and how do you police it? But they are doing it. There's fines up to $1,000 for first offense, no warning. One municipality has one warning, and you're fined the next time. So I'm just wondering, in the report that's coming to council in January, will there be talk about, because in your report, David, you mentioned the province allows municipalities to impose stricter restrictions. Staff's initial review indicates that putting the same restrictions in place as alcohol consumption. Well, you can't smoke, you can't drink alcohol on Main Street, you can't drink alcohol on the beach or in public parks. I believe that same restriction should be placed on the smoking of marijuana. Will there be public consultation in this regard, or is this something that staff are going to come forward with your report speaking to cannabis? And will the restriction on the use of cannabis be discussed in your report for smoking of cannabis in public places?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. We will monitor what other communities are doing. Part of the reason why we're doing this information report is to put the issue out there. You know, we'd certainly be delighted to hear from members of council on their perspective of it. And many of you have spoken to a lot of people in the last few months and probably have a really good sense of where our community sensibility is in terms of use of cannabis. So we're happy to take that input. And if council wants some more formal public consultation, we can arrange that. And that's why we're putting the information report out tonight.
Further questions on this report? If not, the next one then is the cycling initiative report, and we have this evening our recreation supervisor, Lisa, would like to speak to it. Lisa, please.
Hello, everyone. You may recall that actually a year ago today, a gentleman by the name of Justin Jones was here at council, and council received our first bicycle-friendly community summary report and recommendations. Justin is the bicycle-friendly program manager with the Share the Road Cycling Coalition, and provided a very detailed document for staff and council to use moving forward in order to become a bicycle-friendly community, which was identified as an objective of council. So I am here tonight just to provide an update on where we are. At that point, we had submitted an application for a designation and received an honorable mention, which we were delighted to receive, but ultimately we're not satisfied with quite yet at reaching that goal. So we put in some work this year, formed some new partnerships, and really built on the feedback that we received with that application. And the information report that I put together tonight highlights some of the work that's happened over the last 12 months with regards to the 5 E's, which are essential to the achievement of a designation. And those 5 E's are a collaborative approach that really shows a fulsome group of people in a community coming together to ensure that cycling is safe and something that people of any age can do and want to do in their community. At this stage, we've had an exciting year. There's lots of things that have happened, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to the points that I've included in the report. And I'll also let you know that we have resubmitted an application in 2018 for a bronze designation, and are hopeful that we see that come to fruition this year based on the efforts and the work that we've been doing. I will also take this time to acknowledge the support of our community and the various groups that I've worked with over time. So our local schools, the BIAs, the chamber, internally with my staff and peers. We launched a new cycling and trails map this year, which all of the graphic and map work was done in-house with our GIS staff, which was very incredible to work with. And then we outsourced some of the design of it. We were also fortunate to receive funding through the Safe Cycling Education Fund, close to $7,000, which allowed us to distribute over 1,500 bike lights this year and really equip our community with some safety measures. And we also had the fortune of council approving a part-time cycling position as part of our 2018 operating budget, which allowed us to provide some additional community engagement and accomplish some of the things that we wouldn't have been able to do without that support. So just an opportunity to thank all of those, and of course yourselves for supporting this initiative and really allowing me to run with it. So thank you.
Thank you for the work, Lisa. Any questions? If not, thank you very much, Lisa. The next item then is the marketing study for our recreational facility, and our Director of Community Services, Jane, would like to speak to it, I'm sure.
Thank you. I think you've got a majority of the information there in your report, and if I can just do a quick synopsis of it. Excuse me. We're excited to be working with Leisure Plan International Incorporated for this project. We had two bids received. They were the preferred one. They met our budget of under $40,000, and we've commenced discussions with them. I've included in your report this evening a synopsis of the proposed questions, or the elements of the questions that they're currently working on that we can expect to hear. A telephone survey is going to be conducted within the coming weeks, in which residents living in Saugeen Shores will have an opportunity to complete if they are contacted. And staff is going to be working closely with the pool advocacy group that we've heard at the podium in the past. They have a lot of energy that we're going to capitalize on and help us get the word out to encourage people to participate in the phone survey if approached. Council can anticipate a finding of the findings of the report to be presented in the first quarter of 2019.
Thank you, Jane. Any questions? So here's Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our Director of Community Services. Back in May, we talked about Council having a chance to see those questions, not just a synopsis of them, but to see them before they go out to make sure that they met our criteria. Will we be able to see them before they're put out on the surveys?
Typically, it's not the norm that they're shared. However, I can formally ask that question to the consultant. In the meantime, what I can suggest from council as a whole is that if there's anything that you want to be considered as part of the questions, to forward to me, that I can disseminate to the consultant for consideration of those questions.
I understand that, but in May, we asked that we got to see the questions before they go out. So is there a way that we can make this happen?
I'll take the lead of the consultant, and with his advice, he's done this format numerous times and knows the value and just values of sharing those questions with the public and with council. I will formally ask him as I suggested, and I'll certainly get back to council.
I sure hope that we don't have to wait on a consultant's opinion to be able to talk to council.
I think we want to be cautious of the outcomes of the report as well. We don't want to necessarily deviate some of the questions that this consultant has used numerous times throughout this process. So certainly, as I said, I'll certainly provide that question to them, and I'll get back to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just sorry, Councillor. I think the CIO would like to say.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to direct a question to a member of council. I'm not sure I've ever done that. Councillor Matheson, it may be worthwhile if you have some discussion with the director on what you're hoping to achieve by understanding the questions, and then she can give that context to the consultant. I think if the consultant understands what the goal is, then they may be able to better answer your question. That may help get the answers that you're looking for.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was hoping to understand what the questions were, just to see where we're going with them, just as the council's view, to make sure that our understanding of the questions going out meet our criteria as well as not just the consultants, because we're inevitably the ones who are asking the question. And so if I will talk with the director of community services, but I would like to see the questions.
Councillor Grace.
Mr. Mayor, so I did actually send this question to Jane today. One of the things that I mentioned when we first talked about this issue in May was that I thought it would be very helpful for us to include a study of comparable communities that have gone through this experience. And one of the concerns of some of our business members in our town is how a rec center in different formats would affect their businesses. And I thought it would be useful to look at comparable communities and see what their experience was, and so I'm asking if that's going to be included somewhere in the study. If not, how could it be added?
Certainly, the consultant indicated this some time ago when I proposed this question to them, is that it doesn't necessarily bring value added to the end approach that we're looking for. What we're looking for in the market study is to ensure the municipality is in a position to move forward with an aquatic facility or a recreational facility. In saying that, it's certainly, as he has suggested, that could be borne on the issue of the municipality to garner that information. And we in hand have started to have those conversations with recreation providers in Saugeen Shores already. Keeping in mind, though, the consultant also has a tremendous amount of experience, and I continue to say that. And through his experience, he's worked in a number of municipalities. Few of them that have been in a position where a Y has come to the community. What I mean by that is a Y typically already has existed in the community, but there are some minimal ones that we could draw on his expertise to provide some input into the over-end results. But it's not necessarily part of the questions, but the synopsis and the elements of the questions does talk about the somewhat of an environmental scan, I'll say, and for the usage of recreation. Some elements of those questions may also come through through that process that you're looking for.
Thank you. So I guess what I was thinking of is not, I'm glad that you're talking to the fitness businesses, that's great. But and maybe there's some way that you're planning outside of the consultant study to take a look at someplace like Goderich or Kincardine and just see, you know, let's just find out what happened to their businesses before and after the rec center came to their town. That's what I guess I'm looking for, that I think would be, I know that's an issue that's troubling a lot of people, and I think that would help us.
It's also been discussions that have come up frequently in our conversations with the Old Sound YMCA and how they dealt with it too. So it's certainly something that's on the forefront.
Councillor Mike Myatt. Did you have a question, Mike? So go ahead.
And I concur. Councillor Grace, I do really think it's important that we hear from the community, well, staff, I suppose. And I spoke in length with the Goderich officials that were involved 15 years ago when the Family Y arrived in their town. And I think for peace of mind, I think there needs to be a section of that report speak to what impacts is this going to have on local business. I think that's an important component of the study that should be there, whether it's done by staff or through the market study. But you know, because there is significant concern from our fitness providers in town, what's going to happen to us if a Family Y does arrive on our doorstep. So I think it's a very good question you raised, and I hope it's part of that report. I did have a request, and Councillor Rich and I met with the pool advocacy group, one of our local churches back in June, I guess it was. It was a pretty good, well attended. And at that meeting, they talked about being provided with an update report, you know, a communication piece, to let the community know where we're at with the blending process. Now, I mean, I don't know how many people listen on Monday nights. All the media are here, so they do cover it. But I think they were asking for just you know, an update report in writing, I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jane. Jane, could that happen? Could you send just a 5-step process, you know, letter to the advocacy group? Just say, here's where we're at. Like, here are our next 5 steps. There's something they wanted to see back in June circulated, and Councillor Rich, I think you could vouch for that meeting we were at. They just wanted to know where the process was heading. So is that something that can happen, Jane?
We have a meeting scheduled with the group next week to talk about the process, where we are to date, and how they can be part of that.
Councillor Dave Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A simple question. The last time that we had the presentation from the folks from the YMCA in Owen Sound, they said that they were going to do a feasibility study. And now I'm here, we're doing a marketing study. Are these one and the same thing? And if they're not, is there any significant overlap in what they're trying to achieve?
They are the same thing.
They're the same thing.
Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our Director of Community Service. I might have missed it. Do we have a sample? Could you tell me what the sample size of the population that's going to be surveyed is?
412, I believe, is the number.
That's not really is that a good representation of the town? And will we be able to guarantee that we're getting an accurate representation of the town? Because Saugeen Shores has, it's quite skewed in its the money, the amount of money that's in the town. We may get 400 people that have deep pockets, whereas we're not really getting hold of the people that can or cannot afford it. I just wondering, is 412 with the size of our population accurate representation of what we're going to find out?
Yes, it's an accurate representation. As far as getting the appropriate coverage for all the demographics, what will happen is when you receive a phone call, you'll go through a series of questions to ensure that you are in the appropriate demographics that they want to proceed with, completing a questionnaire. They'll ensure that they have the exact numbers for the exact different categories, I'll say for lack of a better word, to ensure that there's appropriate coverage.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. And just follow up on that. My understanding was when we had the feasibility study presentation that it was going to not only capture residents of Saugeen Shores, but the feasibility to market this facility to outlying areas where people currently may travel to Owen Sound or to Kincardine or to Hanover, that the catchment area of the draw would be greater than just the residents of Saugeen Shores. Is it contemplated that the survey would encompass people who live in maybe Tara or Paisley or Chesley, some of the outlying areas?
No, at this point, it's strictly residents in Saugeen Shores. If seasonal residents happen to have a phone number, and they may be approached as well, but at this point, it's residents in Saugeen Shores.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, because I'm seeing, I just remind council that this is one input. It's an important input, but the other things that you've spoken about will be taken under consideration. There's the other partner here, which is the why, and the why, if council decides to go down this route, and there's ifs, the why also has to agree. They have to be a willing partner, and they're not going to agree if they don't have the support that they require. And part of that will be consulting with potential or members from other communities. Their pool is much larger than Saugeen Shores. So the information we're going to get from the feasibility study is one input that goes into a final decision.
Okay, so that's the end of our agenda, and I think we'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, all in favor. We'll take a reconvene at 9:05 for council.
The preceding program was brought to you by Bruce Telecom.